2022 presidential election. Local networks have called Yoon Suk-yeol of the main opposition People Power Party as South Korea's 20th president. The president-elect will be delivering his victory speech at the People Power Party campaign headquarters. We connect live to our Lee Kyung-eun, who is standing by over there. Kyung-eun, has Yoon arrived yet?
Hi, Daniel. Well, Yoon Suk-yeol has not arrived just yet, but we saw him coming out of his house a couple of minutes ago. Well, Yoon was already called by local networks that he is highly likely to win, but he did not come out of his house until he was confirmed as the winner, actually declared as the winner. So that was about a couple of minutes ago. And as soon as that news came out, we saw loud cheers here, people chanting a change of government, which was the very slogan of Yoon's campaign. Now, Yoon will likely, as you said, will deliver his victory speech here before his fellow party members and reporters. And tomorrow, as the first schedules as president-elect, the first thing he will do will be paying tribute at Seoul National Cemetery in line with South Korea's political tradition, and that is set for 10 a.m. And then he will hold his official press briefing at 11 a.m. That's right here at his campaign headquarters was set up here today. And then at 2 p.m., you will attend the PPP's general meeting where the party members and he would address pending issues. You will likely to arrive here within a couple of minutes, and I will bring more updates in our later newscast. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, thank you for those updates, Kyung-eun. Let's look at what's being done in terms of numbers that's coming in the 2022 presidential race in South Korea. One candidate has a clear lead, according to the National Election Commission. Yoon Suk-yeol of the main opposition People Power Party, of course. The former prosecutor general was in a neck-and-neck race throughout the ruling Democratic Party race against Lee Jae-myung. And it looks like right now he is considered the president-elect with 48.59% of the vote, and over 47.8% by Lee Jae-myung. So right now, with more than 97% of the votes counted as of close to 4 a.m., this is the number we have at this point. Now, the first presidential election during the pandemic has wrapped up, marking a record voter turnout of over 77%. In fact, the people were allowed to vote as well. Our Kim Yeon-sung went out to a polling station to witness the full process.
The 20th presidential election has drawn to a close. That means that there's no more campaigning and no more ballots to cast. Now it's just a waiting game for the people of South Korea and the presidential hopefuls. 14,464 polling stations opened for the final day of voting from 6 a.m. to 7:30 p.m.
And one of them is here, the third polling station in Pyeongchang-dong in Seoul's Chongno-gu district. This district is right at the center of South Korean politics and has been a key battleground for many politicians. And Wednesday has been a monumental day in Chongno-gu political history as the district held two elections, the presidential election and a local by-election.
I feel like the by-election has a more direct impact on me rather than the presidential election. I also feel close to the by-election candidate because it's someone who I've been following for a long time.
My heart feels full, and I think this is a historical moment. I hope my vote can help the country, and if the candidate I support becomes elected, I really hope that person doesn't lose his way.
I really hope the 20th president unites both parties and doesn't tear people apart. During the last 5 years, polarization has become serious. There has been a lot of anxiety over economy and security. People's hope showed through early voting, and I expect more people to vote today.
They weren't the only ones enthusiastic about this presidential race. For this presidential election, voter turnout marked 77.1%, a strong figure and one similar to the turnout seen during the last presidential election. Voting ended at 6 p.m. for regular voters. The last hour and a half was reserved for the estimated 880,000 voters who were infected with COVID-19 or who are self-isolating.
By 6 o'clock, the supervisors here had all changed into protective gear, and they made sure to separate regular voters, those with COVID-19, and those who are self-isolating.
This is the third time South Korea has carried out an election during a pandemic, but the first time that COVID-19 patients were able to vote on the same day and at the same place as the other voters. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Now, for a breakdown of the 2022 presidential election and what to expect under the new administration, we are joined on the line by Professor Ramon Pacheco Pardo, Head of International Relations at King's College London. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for making time at this very difficult and demanding time. First of all, normally, does an election turnout that's massive reflect support or an approval or disappointment and a need for change usually? And what's the case for South Korea this time?
Well, we have seen, first of all, an election with a very high turnout, almost the same as the last election, in which the electorate has decided by the smallest of margins. So I think to an extent this shows obviously that there is a division between Koreans, left and right wing Koreans. But on the other hand, I think it also shows that for many centrist voters, any of the two options would have done. It seems that up to 1/4 of former Moon Jae-in voters have voted this time for Yoon Suk-yeol, so they have changed parties. But also we assume that many conservative voters have actually decided to vote for a liberal candidate. So in a sense, it seems that there are many voters who are not as polarized as we thought and who think that any of the two candidates was equally good from their perspective.
In your opinion, what would be the decisive factor in becoming a strong critic of the Moon Jae-in government?
I think so. I think there are voters who are critical of the Moon Jae-in government. This tends to happen with any governing party, it has to be said, and not only in Korea, but outside of Korea. I guess there are some voters who think that he didn't deliver on the promises on which he was elected in 2017. I think there is also COVID fatigue among some voters who, even though Korea has had a good response to the pandemic, but they feel that maybe the restrictions should have been removed sooner, and we have seen this actually in elections in other countries as well. And I think, of course, there are voters who are concerned about housing prices, about how the way the economy is going, maybe about their own job prospects, and they blame the incumbent party and the incumbent president for these issues.
What would be your assessment of the North Korea policies of the Moon Jae-in government? There were some critics of the government in terms of that aspect. And what will be the direction forward for the coming administration and the expectations of the people in terms of cross-border ties?
I think it is fair to say that some South Koreans have been critical of the engagement policy of President Moon. They believe that he has spent too much time on this issue, but we should also be clear that this hasn't really been the main issue throughout the campaign. It has been more about the economics, some gender issues as well, and there has been some discussion about North Korea, but it seems that very few voters have voted in taking into consideration this North Korea policy. I would assume that Yoon is going to take a tougher stance towards North Korea. I would assume that he's going to be more critical, for example, of nuclear tests or the human rights record of North Korea. But he has also made clear that if there is an opportunity for engagement between the two Koreas, between the US, North Korea, and South Korea on a bilateral basis, he's going to pursue it. So I think to an extent we have to wait and see what the reaction of North Korea is going to be once June takes office in a couple of months, because the US is open to dialogue. The Biden administration has made this clear, and President-elect Yoon has said that he will do need to engage. So I think really the ball now is on North Korea's court. We have to see if he's willing to engage, or otherwise we will see criticism, deterrence, sanctions from South Korea and from the international community.
Speaking of the ball being on someone's court, when it comes to the economy, we've saw some disappointing numbers in terms of the employment figures and key figures related to the economy here in South Korea. What were some of the possible shortcomings in the Moon Jae-in administration, and what will be the expectations for the incoming administration in terms of the changes they might implement to turn things around?
If we look at unemployment in South Korea, it has remained more or less stable, the unemployment rate and the youth unemployment rate, really since the Asian financial crisis. But clearly many Koreans think that South Korea should be doing better. So I think there's going to be an expectation that the incoming administration is going to find ways to promote especially private sector permanent employment as opposed to temporary. And I think if you look at the income inequality in South Korea has been decreasing, but wealth inequality has been increasing over the past few years. So I think that there's going to be a heavy focus by voters, by the South Korean electorate on, first of all, stabilizing housing prices because they have been going up dramatically over the past few years. But secondly, also finding ways of decreasing this wealth inequality, which is especially pronounced between younger South Koreans and older South Koreans whose wealth far exceeds those of people in their 20s and even the 30s.
The pandemic has been a very fatiguing issue for the nation and the economy as well. What about the quarantine measures? There were some praise during the early stages with K-quarantine being a major pride factor for South Korea, but then it took a dive recently, and some of the measures that were taken, they were considered too harsh for certain small businesses. So there's been a little back and forth in terms of the policy and the measures that's being implemented. Of course, this being the first time we're experiencing something as big as the COVID-19 pandemic, it's understandable. But what would you advise the incoming administration to focus on in terms of the measure that's tighter or allowing more breathing room for living with COVID-19 or allowing a greater ease of businesses to continue what they're supposed to do?
I think it's going to be interesting to see the next 2 months because, of course, Moon will still be the president until May. And I think there is this push among South Koreans to remove the current restrictions. Of course, small and medium-sized enterprises, businesses, they think that they should have been removed sooner. But now we also see consumers who, to an extent, have moved on. And now they want to have an economy that is fully open. They want businesses to be able to operate as before the pandemic. So it could be interesting that by the time Yoon takes office, many of the restrictions have been removed, including, for example, for traveling overseas and coming back to South Korea. In any case, I would expect by the time Yoon takes office in May, if there are still some remaining restrictions, I would expect him to move quite quickly to remove them, because we have seen this in many other countries after the Omicron peak that South Korea is under now, and will probably continue for a few more days in March. And we have seen other countries that after the peak, governments have been very quick in removing remaining restrictions, because we shouldn't forget, South Korea, of course, has done very well in dealing with the pandemic, much better than other countries, but there's also the mental health issue. And I think many Koreans, like many people really in the rest of the world, they have this fatigue from the pandemic, and they really want to go back to the normal that we had before this started a couple of years ago.
Right, we do count the days until when we could be out there without masks and feel natural about that. This is the only second election here in South Korea since the impeachment changed the date for picking a new leader. What are some of the key differences compared to the last elections?
I think, in my view, there are two key differences. The first one is that, of course, in the previous one, it was obvious that the Liberals were going to win. There was a huge discontent with President Park during the impeachment process. And now what we have seen in this election is that there are those who are unhappy with the government, but then we shouldn't forget that popularity of Moon Jae-in remains around 45%. So there are also who are happy with his 5 years of government. So this division that we have seen throughout this campaign that has led to a fairly bitter campaign that many people have disliked because of the personal attacks was very different, of course, 2017 when we didn't see this same division. And I think the second issue, which is quite important in my view, is that South Korea itself has changed. South Korea has become much more prominent at the global level. And I think South Koreans are keenly aware of the role that their country plays in international issues, how this affects South Korea itself. So some of the discussions that we have seen, for example, about gender issues, there has been this comparison between South Korea and other developed countries. But even if we look at foreign policy, these discussions that we have seen about how to deal with China, how to deal with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, these type of issues that South Koreans see themselves as see their country as being developed along with many other countries. They compare themselves to other developed countries, and they want to their country to maybe behave in a different way or treat certain issues in a different way because they think they're not a developing country anymore. They're a developed country, so this type of issues should be dealt with in a way that wasn't the case in the past. And I don't think we saw this in 2017 as much as we have seen this time around.
The public is deeply engaged and immersed and interested in everything, the intricacies of the election process from the get-go. Even during the primaries, a lot of people are voicing their approval or disapproval of the way it's being shaped and the way the candidates are being chosen. How much of a pros or cons are there in terms of the extreme immersive, inclusiveness and engagement from the people with the politicians in terms of the process?
I think that's an excellent question. It has been very interesting to see the extent that, as you said, going back to the primaries, this has been going on 4 months. Voters took a keen interest in the policies, of course, of the candidates, but also on personal life, how they have behaved in the past. In the case of Yoon, of course, his past as a prosecutor. So I think that the interest of the South Korean electorate has been really amazing to see, because you don't see this level of engagement in many other democracies, especially mature democracies. For example, over 70% of voters going to the polls, people with COVID going to the polls, and in other countries, really, they have decided to stay home. So I think this shows the level of engagement, but it also increases the level of scrutiny over the candidates in a way that I think is positive, but there are, of course, many critics who think that there's too much scrutiny, for example, on family issues and personal issues that they believe shouldn't be the deciding factor when casting the vote. So I think that's something to take into consideration as well, that the level of scrutiny might be good, but of course there are critics who say, okay, why don't we focus on the policies per se and we forget about other factors that they think are secondary. And this is in contrast with other countries in which, for example, it is very difficult to know the personal life of the candidates. You simply don't know about it. It's not an issue. But in Korea it is. So candidates are treated more.
All right, Professor Pacheco, unfortunately, we're going to have to cut our conversation short because we need to focus on the site where the president-elect has arrived to deliver a speech. So we hope to continue our conversation at a different time, hopefully, to pick your brains a little bit further. Professor Pacheco, thank you so much for making time for us and providing us with your insights. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Now we have the president-elect moving to the site of the campaign headquarters and, of course, on to the national headquarters as well, where the supporters are standing by, mostly dressed in waves of red, shaking hands and all smiles, of course. It's been a tight race, and there was a very thin, razor-thin edge during the midway through the ballot counts, and from then on, it seemed like the PPP's candidate never looked back. He was at home watching the process. We were waiting for him to show up, and we were looking forward to checking his expression. And in the campaign headquarters, this must be a very significant moment for the candidate as well as the party.
She is Chang Ye-won delivering the flowers. And Representative Seo Dong-suk. Could you please accept the cheers of the crowd?
윤석열, 윤석열. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
네, 이 자리에 저 안철수
Well,
대표님도
here we have
나와주셨습니다.
also
안철수
the
대표님,
representative
저
An철수.
인사드리면서 우리 큰
Could you
박수
please
보내주시기 바랍니다.
greet the crowd? Please give him a big round of applause.
네, 감사합니다. 안철수, 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 안철수. 네. 저희가 카메라를 바라보고
Well, we
우리 다
are
같이
looking at the
일어나서
cameras. Let us rise and hold our hands.
큰 우리 정권 교체를
And
이룩한 것에 대해서
Let
윤석열과
us cheer
당선된
on as we were successful in the change of government. Let us chant cheers.
제가 정권 교체 하면
When I say
해주시고요.
change of government,
세번
please
하겠습니다.
call out
정권
만세.
교체! 정권 교체! 정권 교체! 네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
다음은
Next,
우리 당선인님의
we will have the president-elect.
발언해 주십시오. 윤석열! 대통령!
The president-elect, Yoon Suk-yeol.
윤석열! 대통령! 윤석열! 대통령! 윤석열!
윤석열,
대통령!
President.
네, 감사합니다. 감사합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you.
네. 자! 네, 감사합니다. 좀 이따 또 자리가 당사 앞에 기회가 있으니까.
So we have another chance
a
few moments later to cheer. So why don't we ask Mr. Yoon to deliver his speech?
나머지 다른 분들 앉으셔도 좋겠습니다.
So please have a seat.
모두 함께 애써주신
Well, this was a grand journey that we exerted all our efforts all together.
당직자
All
우리 의원
the
여러분께
members of
정말
our party
깊이
and
감사드리고
all the
참
distinguished
뜨거운
members. I would like to thank them very much
아주
for
열정적인
their passionate
그
support
레이스였던 것 같습니다.
and their passionate
이 과정을
efforts
통해서
that they made during our
많은
campaign.
것을 느끼고 배웠고
On this journey, I have learned a lot,
결과는
and the result that we see today
국민의힘
is the result that we have achieved together with the People Power Party, together with Representative An철수. But more than that, it is the victory of the great people of Korea.
그리고 마지막까지
So I would like to thank all of us,
멋지게
all our
뛰어준
supporters,
우리 민주당의
did
이재명 후보,
their
또
best
정의당의
until the
심상정
end.
후보,
My competitors, Mr. Lee Jae-myung and Ms. Shim Sang-jung as well.
결과는 이루지 못했지만
The
대한민국
results
정치
were not
발전에
achieved,
우리
however.
모두 함께 큰
Their efforts
기여를 했다는 점에서
were great contribution
그
to
가치를
the development
높이 평가하고 싶고
of the Korean
두
politics.
분께도 좀
And
심심한
therefore,
위로의
I would
말씀을
like to
드리고 싶습니다.
offer words of consolation as well as words of gratitude for their contribution.
정말 이 선거운동을 하면서
This campaign
많은 걸
period,
배웠습니다.
I have learned a great deal.
그 나라의 리더가 되기 위해서 필요한 게 어떤 건지
And
또
I
국민들의
have
목소리를
seen
어떻게 경청해야
things
하는지 이런 많은 것들을 배웠고 그리고
and
우리가 이 선거를 하는
during this
경쟁을 하는 이
election
모든 것이 다
and this competition,
국민을 위한 것이고
this is all for the people.
우리 경쟁은 일단 끝났고
And the
이 모든
competition
힘을
ends
합쳐서
here. Now we have to muster our strengths all together
대한민국
to make
위해서
greater Korea, and we have to be unified, putting behind the competition. Now, as the president-elect, I will prepare the new administration, and when I take the office officially, I will uphold the spirit of constitution, the spirit of parliamentary, and we will be hand in hand with the opposition party so that we can venerate the people. And the PPP, our party, and the People's Party will integrate as soon as possible so that we can expand the support from our people and we can be a mature political party. And to that end, we will exert our efforts together. From the scorching heat in the summer, we started out this journey with a sweat on our forehead until the winter time, freezing cold. I would like to thank all of you sincerely for all the things that you've done. And I would like to extend my gratitude to the Korean people for their support and aiding. I will do my best to live up to your expectations.
All right, that was President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol delivering his victory speech over there at the campaign headquarters with his fellow supporters there, all dressed in a wave of red. There seems to be a moment of silence. There should be more conversations going on. They are awaiting further instructions, and we believe An Chul-soo is sitting next to him showing support as well. And the next destination for him will be not too far away. He will be moving on to the national headquarters of the People Power Party to deliver a speech at a stage that's been set up. He's receiving more chants and support from his fellow party members as he takes a deep bow and moves on to the next location for another speech to be delivered at a podium and a stage that's been set up. Looks like there's more left to be said in exchange before he moves on. Once again, it was not an overwhelming landslide victory as some had anticipated. While there was a clear call for demand for a change of government during the presidential election, there were still strong support for Yoon Suk-yeol's rival Lee Jae-myung of the DP. He was neck and neck until midway through the ballot count. There was a razor-thin lead, but then from then on it ballooned into a single-digit percentage point lead, and then it never seemed to falter or regress from then on. He never looked back, and now the former prosecutor general is all smiles and is raising his hands. The hand gestures have been quite symbolic during his campaign rallies, reminiscent of the legendary South Korean national football team coach Gus Hiddink. He had that sort of an uppercut wave gesture to get the crowd going. Here he seems to have the energy flowing as well, shaking hands with his fellow party members. Many hands to shake along the way as well. It is, need I remind you, that past 4 a.m. local time here in Korea, and I'm sure the nominee, now the president-elect, has spent countless hours with eyes red, bloodshot, lacking sleep, as it is for many people who have been following the campaign trail, supporting him, as well as those who are covering the story, like our reporters who are out there on the scene, who have been following the campaign trails of various candidates. And now, as we speak, we see him slowly, gradually moving out of the campaign headquarters to head to the next destination, where we will be looking forward to another speech from Yoon Suk-yeol. Our Lee Kyung-eun has been standing by, witnessing the moment at the campaign headquarters. Let's go to her right now to hear about what the atmosphere there is like right now. She has been following the campaign trail closely. And Kyung-eun.
Well, Daniel, the atmosphere here is certainly filled with excitement and a lot of support for Yoon Suk-yeol. And remember, Yoon Suk-yeol, President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol, doesn't have a lot of political experience. 8 months is all he has in terms of political experience. All his life he's been a prosecutor. Well, he actually highlighted that part right here during his victory speech, that he was calling for other people's help as he is going to prepare his next administration. And he also said that tonight's victory is not a victory of his party or people's parties or the party's members, but is the victory of people. So he really tried to emphasize the united front between him and An Chol-soo, at the same time that it is the unification with him and the people. And now he has left the site, but tomorrow he will visit here once again at 11 a.m. and that is going to be his official press briefing as president-elect, and we are going to closely look at what he has to say during that press briefing. And before that, as the first schedule in line with Korea's political tradition, he will pay tribute at Seoul National Cemetery at 10 a.m. And after that press briefing, as I mentioned, at 2 p.m., he is going to attend general meeting of People Power Party, where he and party members are going to address pending issues. Well, this was a hectic day, a long day for Yoon Suk-yeol, but after all, he has proved that his calls or people's calls for a change of government was indeed achieved, was realized through people's active participation in voting. Well, the voter turnout was not as high as people here have expected, but it has resulted in what they have ultimately called for, which is change of government. And that was something that we've been hearing all day here today. People were chanting Yoon Suk-yeol's name and change of government, the very slogan that we've been hearing in the past months throughout his campaign. And now he's wrapping up the day. Party members are wrapping up the day here. And let's go, I think now eyes are on what he has to say to his supporters who are standing by at the People Power Party headquarters in Yeouido District, which is right next to, right here, which National Assembly. Daniel?
Right, this is the takeoff part of the flight, and there's of course the flight and then the landing part, which can be also tricky as well. As you mentioned, Young, this is quite an historical moment. A lot of firsts there. We had the first time presidential elections were held during the pandemic, as we've seen, with all the masks being worn, with the supporters there. Still behind the mask, we could see the huge smiles with their eyes celebrating the victory. And there's been age changes to the voters, so there were more voters that were able to decide on the leader at a younger age, and the first prosecutor general to be turned a president, and this is also his first stint at a government position here. So this is quite an extraordinary first step. We look forward to something more to come from here and steadily build on here from here on. Thank you for being out there for us, Kyung-eun. We appreciate it. Now, let's head on to the national HQ of the People Power Party, where Kim Do-yeon is standing by to give us the updates of the situation over there. The Prosecutor General turned President-elect should be on stage to deliver his speech. Do-yeon, what do you have for us?
Hi, Daniel. I'm standing right in front of the national headquarters of the People Power Party, like you said, where the supporters are waiting for him. Now, where he was before was for the campaign members and the media, the campaign headquarters. So here we have the regular supporters who have been supporting throughout the campaign as a voter, waiting for his address to the public. Now, the campaign said he'll make the speech short and try to keep the volume down because there's a lot of residential areas around here. but they've been waiting for hours for him to come. And I was here before he even left his house, and the big screen behind us was actually tuned into a election coverage where the camera was following him. And as soon as he left the house, we saw the crowd cheer, and they couldn't wait any longer until he comes. So we're still waiting until he takes the mic. But the people here, even though it's a little bit freezing as it's 4:30 in the morning, they're actually not feeling the cold, and they're actually waiting for him, and it seems like the weather is not bothering them at all. So he's about to take the microphone, and we have a lot of people here, so it's getting a little bustling out here because they can't wait until the president-elect takes the microphone. So we hear the national anthem, I guess, to greet his walk over here. We're only a few blocks away, but we're still waiting for him to take the microphone.
All right, Doyan, thank you for those updates. It must be really loud and cold out there. We appreciate you being there, witnessing the moment, and reporting to us in detail. We'll get back to you in our later newscast, I suppose. Thank you.
Thank you.
돌봄 시간이 조금 대부분 돌봄을 하게 되면 4시 반까지거든요. 학교나 어린이집이나. 그리고 6시까지 돌봐준다 하더라도 대부분 일찍 찾아가기를 원하시는 원장 선생님들이 많기 때문에 그런 부분에 있어서 저희가 조금 편하게 아이들을 7시까지는 봐주셔야지 일을 할 수 있기 때문에 그런 부분이 좀 좋아졌으면.
저도 개인적으로 조그만 사업체를 운영하고 있는데 그 방역으로 인해서 사실은 개인 사업자들이 굉장히 많은 피해를 받고 그 피해가 어떻게 보상될 것이며 또 그 기준에 따라서 지금 사실은 되게 매주마다 바뀌고 있는 이 기준이 우후죽순 생기는 이 정책들이 좀 안정화되지 않을까 그 기대를 하고 있습니다.
자영업자들에 대한 어떤 어려움들 이런 부분들이 조금 더 이렇게 좀 보완도 되고 혜택도 좀 많아지면 그런 부분이 됐으면 좋겠습니다.
선진국들이 하고 있는 것처럼 조금 빨리 방역 규제를 조금 더 풀어서 이제 여행을 원하는 사람들이나 그렇지 않고 뭐 비즈니스 할 수 있는 사람들한테도 좀 더 많은 기회를 줄 수 있으면 좋을 것 같다고 생각합니다.
돌봄 시간이 부족하다 보니까 이제 직장 업무에 좀 이렇게 지장을 받을 때가 많습니다. 돌봄 시간을 좀 더 많이 확대해 주셨으면 고맙겠습니다.
저 같은 경우에는 공학대학원에 지금 다니고 있기 때문에 과학기술의 발전에 조금 더 지원이 있었으면 좋겠다고 생각하고 있습니다.
아무래도 다시 저희 국민들이 여행을 많이 다닐 수 있게끔 다른 나라와의 관계도 좀 개선이 됐으면 좋겠고요.
국민 모두가 마음 편하게 그냥 예전에 그 일상으로 돌아갔으면 하는 게 제일 큰 바람이고요. 서민들도 평범하게 다 같이 마음 편하게 살 수 있는 나라를 만들어줬으면 좋겠습니다.
조금 사회가 많이 분열되어 있는 것 같아서 그런 사회 통합을 조금 더 추구할 수 있는 후보에게
그리고 제가 뽑지 않았더라도 국민에 의해서 뽑히신 거니까 잘 하실 거라고 믿습니다.
All right, let's go back to the headquarters, the national headquarters of the People Power Party, where President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol will be getting ready to deliver a speech. We'll go to the site right now to check out what is going on as people are bustling, regardless of the hour that we are in right now, which is past 4:30 a.m. here in South Korea. There's excitement brewing over there. Regardless of the cold, the national anthem was played, and the president-elect is set to step up to that podium, stage that's been set up with a huge monitor at the back. The people are excited to hear what he has to say, and it was clear that, according to our reporters, that he is going to make it brisk and short and sweet, and not so loud as well, because this is a time when many people might be sleeping or just about to wake up and get ready to start their day. So that is showing consideration for the average Joes in some sense. To give you an idea of the trail that's traveled so far for Yoon Suk-yeol, who was the prosecutor general in the past. He is the leading conservative candidate. He helped imprison 2 former presidents, as well as the head of Samsung, a former chief justice of the country's Supreme Court, on charges of corruption. Yoon was the natural choice for South Koreans who are dissatisfied with Moon Jae-in and his government. His Democratic Party have been rocked by a series of scandals that expose some ethical lapses and policy failures, from housing crisis, income inequality to a lack of social mobility, some would say. Yoon said he never imagined entering politics until the very last minute, I suppose. But in response to growing demand, he was on a mission to remove Liberal Party from power. His father was a college professor, his mother a former teacher, and he became a prosecutor not in an easy way. It was a very difficult up and down, topsy-turvy journey towards getting to that job of his dreams. He passed the bar exam on his 9th try. So some would say it's time to take a left turn, but he stuck with it and he knew what he wanted. He made his name as an anti-corruption investigator, and he didn't flinch under political pressure while going after the rich and powerful, and that is how he earned his fame, and people remembered his name for that. During a parliamentary hearing back in 2013, he said this, quote, "I don't owe my loyalty to anyone," which redefined his character, and many people were hinting at the possibility of perhaps this could be a candidate running for presidency someday. But very few would have expected the run for presidency to come so quickly, within less than half a decade. He said, of course, what I mentioned just now was a very important code, that he is not swayed by other external factors or noise. He is focused on getting the job done. In terms of focusing and getting the job done, I suppose you could say he has a tunnel vision in some sense, but that is necessary to shut out the noise and not be influenced by any particular powers that be. Under President Moon Jae-in, Yoon became a household name, first as a senior investigator, then as the prosecutor general. Oh, looks like the national anthem has stopped. Perhaps this would mean the president-elect is stepping up to the podium to deliver a speech. Looks like there's a lot of preparations being made. As you can see, a lot of supporters are standing by in the cold. There's silence. A lot of cameras, a lot of crews, reporters out there waiting for that moment as well. It must be difficult with all the lack of sleep that they've experienced for the president-elect, his supporters, his campaign staff, and the party officials as well. And there's still a certain level of energy coming from that venue. During an introduction, drawing applause from the audience. We did hear the message from presidential nominee Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party. It was neck and neck, and just a few hours before he conceded defeat. The NEC has also confirmed that here he is coming up to the podium. Still masked because we are still battling the pandemic, and he is removing the mask to more clearly send this message. Expectations are sky high right now.
Introducing President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol. Ladies and gentlemen,
정말 모두 고맙습니다.
thank you very, very much.
이 늦은 시간까지
Until this
그렇게
late
지켜봐
hours,
주시고
you were here to
또
support me,
지금까지
watching out the counts
격려와 성원 보내주셔서
and
정말
showing your
감사드립니다.
passionate support. I would like to thank you once again.
정말 이 초심자를 이끌어서 이 자리까지
First-time
오게
politician
만들어 주신
like myself,
우리 여러분과
bringing me
또
to
국민
this
여러분께 깊이
status.
감사드립니다.
It's all because of your support, and I'd like to extend my gratitude.
우리 국민 여러분께서
The people of
저를
Korea
이렇게 이끌어주고 지켜주셨듯이
had raised me and protected me,
오로지
and as such,
국민만
I will
바라보고
venerate and
국민만 제대로
look out for
모시는 그런 사람이 되겠습니다,
our
여러분.
people.
우리 대한민국 국민은
The people
모두
of the Republic
하나입니다.
of Korea are one,
지역이나
regardless of the
진영이나
region or political
계층이나
parties,
이런 거 따질 것
classes.
없이
We should,
우리 대한민국
regardless
국민은
of all this,
어디에
people of
계시든지
Korea, wherever
다
you are,
똑같은 이 나라
we
국민이고
are all the people
모두
of Korea,
공정하게
and thus
대우받아야 합니다.
we have the right to be treated fairly.
우리 국민 모두
Now all
하나라는
our people
마음으로
are one, and
저도
with that
이
spirit,
나라의 국민 통합을
I too
최우선으로
will put my utmost
생각하겠습니다.
priority to the unity of the people.
그리고 우리 자유민주주의
And the liberal
헌법 정신을
democracy and the spirit,
가슴에 새기고
constitutional spirit, will always be
민생을
close
살피고
to my heart. And with that in mind, I will look after the livelihoods of the people
늘
and
고민하고
will
그리고
ponder
국제사회에서
over the
우리나라가
warm welfare that could be provided to the people.
책임과
And we
또 자유의
will also
연대를
keep in
다할
mind
수 있도록 최선을
the
다하겠습니다.
national status in the international stage and what we can do as the Republic of Korea.
지난 더운 여름날부터
From the
지금 이
summer
순간까지
days in the hot summer
저와 함께
until
이 정권
this time
교체를
today,
위해 최선을
I
다해
would like to
주신
thank all of you
여러분께
who did
감사드립니다.
your utmost in the change of government
정권
together
교체는
with me.
더
The change
좋은
of
나라를
government
만들기 위한
is
것이니만큼
to make
우리 모두
the Republic
함께
of Korea
힘을
greater.
합쳐서
And
한
therefore,
마음으로
we should all
우리 나라와
join
국민만
forces
생각해
and
주시기를
only think about
부탁드립니다.
our people in doing so.
저 역시
I will also
선거운동을 할 때와 똑같은 마음으로
keep
초심을
my
잃지
mind
않고
and will not
앞으로도
forget
제
where I started
역할과
out
직책을
during the
정직하게
presidential campaign. And
수행하도록
with that in mind,
하겠습니다.
I will
여러분
faithfully
모두
carry out my
감사드립니다. 그리고 우리
mandate.
국민의힘
Thank you very
의원님들,
much.
우리 당직자 여러분,
I would like to
우리 이준석
thank the
대표님
executives of
정말
our party, the
고맙습니다.
members of the party, Lee Jun-suk, the representative of our party, for all their support.
네, 우리 새로운 위대한 대한민국을 만들어간
So we have our president-elect who will make the Republic of Korea greater. Let us cheer on him once again for the president-elect Yoon Suk-yeol.
당당한 대통령입니다. 위대한 대한민국 만들어내겠습니다. 대한민국을 새롭게 하겠습니다.
Let's go back to our Kim Do-yeon, who's standing by at the national headquarters of the People Power Party. Do-yeon, it looks like that final speech has been delivered, and many people, including yourself, can go get some well-deserved rest. What has been the situation like over there at the headquarters?
Right, what you just heard was the president-elect address the supporters in person for the first time. So his message message was centered around him thanking everyone for the support. He said that people have led him here, so he will now lead the people. While uniting the people will be his first priority. And as you have mentioned numerously, he says democracy and constitution will be in his heart, and fairness, as he has emphasized throughout his whole campaign, he said will be for everyone. Now, change in government, he says, is to make the nation better. So he hopes that everyone will be in support of him making the nation better, making the nation into a better place. Daniel?
All right, Yoon, we thank you for being out there for us. And of course, the president-elect had a lot of thanks to give. Quite a contrast from the campaign rally that we've seen a lot of criticisms to offer back then. Now we'll look forward to the changes that he will spearhead from here on. Thank you for being out there for us again, Yoon. Do get some rest from now on. Now, there have been leaders that appeared obsessed with certain goals, regardless of the facts, or reality, or public opinion. Those easily swayed by external noise appear to have a tendency to spend a lot of time and energy trying to shape perception the way they see fit. As a prosecutor general who refused to compromise and who put everything on the line to get the job done, we look forward to Yoon Suk-yeol carrying on that mantra. This is where we have to wrap things up. As always, thank you for staying with us.